Why don't you kind of start us off with a little introduction of yourself and kind of the background of VLA and how it's gotten to where it is right now?
Happy to. And hello, everyone. My name is Will Foley. I wear a couple hats. I have a full-time job, but this being my part-time passion project, the VLA. The VLA is a professional volleyball league here in the U.S. The way that we got started was a group of other passionate volleyball players really saw an opportunity in the market for professional volleyball here in the U.S. Those people include former Olympian Lloyd Ball, gold medalist, been to 4 Olympics, and carries a ton of international volleyball experience. Myself, who comes from a background in the tech startup industry. And then there's a few other individuals that are across the U.S. That are also helping, and the team is growing.
Okay, very good. So this is kind of this would have been your 3rd season, right? Had things not kind of got shut down last year?
Yeah, I think with COVID, a lot of norms have been redefined. Last year, so 2019 to 2020 was our inaugural season, which turned into a single event midsummer when it was safe to do so. That really gave us a launching point to create high-level volleyball content, share it online, create an online presence, and that presence has grown since. And so right now we are going into our 2nd season here in 2021. We got a few additional events. We've had 2 events so far, and we plan to have, I think, 5 or 6 more. And being a startup sport, it's highly flexible and as well as fluid in the world of events during a pandemic.
Well, and that's actually an important part of your business model in these early years is you're working very much on an event basis where it's not just single matches. It's like the ones that actually the ones we were just talking about coming up in April here in Buffalo. It looks like it's 2 back-to-back days of triangulars. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay. That's tied in with one of the local clubs here. And I know that in the past, and I'm sure going forward, you've run events where your teams have been competing kind of in the space of, say, a juniors event that was already on the schedule. So you're taking advantage of that sort of, I guess, I don't know, campaign and environment and atmosphere and all of that.
Yeah. So when I think about starting a league, a sports league specifically, a professional sports league from scratch, there is so many things to consider. Where we play the matches, how many games or matches we play, and how we are going to kind of schedule a season. With knowing that there are no millions of dollars from previous seasons to really fund a season. And so we took a look at how other sports have done it, and we really modeled this tour-based professional league based on the PVL, the professional, the PLL, the Professional Lacrosse League that popped up about 2 years ago, and then just recently purchased the Legacy League. And PLL was a tour-based model from the beginning. And I think some of the reasons when we started investigating why was that there was really a changing demographic of fans attaching to sports leagues, specifically it being more player-centric rather than location-centric. So when you think of the MLB, you think of Boston and New York and the cities associated with it and the players. But when you think of, another angle and another perspective, when you think about the NBA, you think about LeBron James. I'm a LeBron James fan. Wherever he goes, I am a LeBron James fan. And so we really saw an opportunity to really do a tour-based model and really put our players in the forefront of how our fans connect with the league, which allows us to, I think, better connect with our players, but also reduce the costs and overhead of creating those leagues because we don't have to purchase gyms, we don't own any of the properties, and we are partnering where we have fans. And so we're going to where those fans are, which is always evolving and changing.
Yeah, it's interesting that you bring up the athlete focus because obviously we've got a very high-profile Athletes Unlimited League that's happening right now, which takes exactly that sort of view. They're just on a different funding level from what you guys are doing, and it's a much more condensed, it's only a 5-week season. How do you compare yourselves to what they're working at?
Yeah, I think they do a lot of things really, really well. So Athletes United, I don't know how many of the students here are familiar with it quickly. It's professional volleyball league for the women's teams that are highlighting some of the best players in U.S. volleyball and some international players as John said, a condensed 5-week season. And it's all based on player individual point scoring. And so it creates a really fun attachment to the players rather than the teams. And every week the players actually rotate and switch teams. I think what they're doing really well is they attracted great talent, high production cost. They're doing a good job of multi-threading the content through social media as well as online streaming platforms and your legacy platforms, FS2 and I think a few others. And so they're doing a really good job of putting the content in a lot of different places. I think where there's room for improvement is I think it's really hard to attach yourself to a player as well as the team. And so it becomes a little of a week-to-week challenge to relearn the entire team that your favorite player's playing with. And so I think that it is pushing us to the future with areas of opportunity for improvement.
Yeah, that's interesting. We've got 2 softball players in here, Brianna and Carissa. I don't know if either one of you guys have seen the equivalent thing that they're doing in softball. They actually started with that before they brought in volleyball, and it looks like lacrosse is coming up next somewhere in the future. So that's interesting. For the students, I'm hoping most, if not all of you, have come up with your questions for Will. Go ahead. You can go ahead and put them in the chat, and as they come in, I'll pull them up and I'll ask them, and we'll go from there. While they're working on that, one of the things that's big for a lot of the students in their projects is trying to expand multimedia and just their social media, I guess, reach. What sort of strategies are you guys doing to handle that for the league and for the individual teams?
Yeah, social media is definitely our number one focus right now. How do we grow followers? How do we grow fans? How do we attach a connection to the VLA as well as the players? And so I think it really stems from our research on what is the most popular content types and then attaching it to a person rather than a league. And so we do a lot of top plays that really attract the eyeballs with, from a volleyball perspective, the great digs, the great hits, the high hitting kills, all the things that I think a lot of volleyball players and non-volleyball players look at, and it catches their eye. And then we group it and attach it to a player so that we can make sure that it's not the league, it's the human-to-human connection that we want to really tie our content with to those leagues, to those players. The other thing that we are doing is we recognize that as a professional volleyball league, we want to enable our players to be successful navigating all of the channels that they have in order to be successful. So making sure that they have the tool set to post on social media. They know the content that works and how to really engage with their fans. And the best ones are the ones that are really following those best practices and then pushing those limits. So it's really about educating and enabling them to be successful, to get the benefit of a exponential return as we grow the league.
Okay. All right, good. Questions are coming in. The first one from Robert here actually gets to kind of the main point of what we're talking about in terms of sponsorships. So he asked, does each individual team have their own sponsorship deals, or are they all included under the league's sponsorship agreements?
Yeah, it was one of the first questions that we tackled at the VLA. Do we want to be decentralized or centralized league entity? And so for the most part, we are a centralized league entity, and so the sponsorships would be driven to the league, and then we would be leveraging all of the team's assets to deliver value for our sponsors. And the reason that we came to that conclusion is we looked at a lot of the other leagues that exist, other professional leagues. You look at, the big ones, the MLB, the NFL, the NBA, and you see probably in the last decade or two, this shift into salary caps and all of these things that are trying to balance out the fact that you can pay to win in professional sports. And we wanted to make sure from the start that it was going to be a competition between the teams with equal budgets to find and attract and cultivate the best talent possible. And the competition is not only how well you do on the court, but it's also how well the team can manage the budget and resources that we provide them, so that it becomes a competition between how effective you can manage your teams. So it's centralized for us, and it's been working out well so far to create equitable teams across the league.
Okay. Carrying on with the sponsorship question, Ben is asking, the bulk of your sponsors are volleyball orientated. For example, GBA, AVCA, SMAC volleyball. If you look at a sport like football, soccer, there are leagues sponsored by gambling companies and trophies sponsored by Papa John's, for example. The sponsors are broader based. So why is it that VLA has chosen sponsors and partners which are basically volleyball?
Yeah, we haven't got them yet. There's no doubt we want them. There's no doubt there's value that we can provide. But here lies I think the focus that has allowed us to be successful so far is the path of least resistance. So when we think about who is our target market, right now it is volleyball fans. It's volleyball people. And right now, the easiest phone calls that we can do to lock in partnerships are people that are vested in the success of the sport of volleyball. There is no doubt that I spend time reaching out to non-VL or volleyball sponsors, and there's a few affiliate marketing sponsors that we have. One of them is Coolin FX. They provide ice cold gear, and we sponsor that at our events and advertise it, and we get a slice of any deal that we send them. And so it's not that we are necessarily saying we don't want partners outside of volleyball. It's that with the limited time and resources that we have, we're focusing our time and energy on really tackling our target market, so that when we get into conversations with outside volleyball entities, we can show them the plethora of our partnerships, making it a social peer sell, showing that we have a complete list of partners and you'll be in good hands. And so it's a matter of time until we start locking more and more of those sponsors outside of the volleyball community.
Gotcha. All right, Crystal wants to know, how do you manage to market to people who are not volleyball fans specifically? You kind of said mainly we're focusing on volleyball people, but you do want to broaden the base.
Totally. It's something I think everybody in volleyball is trying to solve for, from the grassroots efforts to get more youth players from organizations like First Point Volleyball Foundation, who is trying to attract outside of the volleyball community to play volleyball. We want to do the same thing. But when we get back to some of what I was mentioning with the path of least resistance, we know it's easier to attract a volleyball player to watch volleyball. When we have that critical base of fans established, I think we can then start really exercising some of the strategies that we've looked at. I've had a conversation recently, yesterday, with an individual from the Ball State School of Immersive Learning, and what we really discussed was, how do we get fans from non-volleyball backgrounds to watch volleyball? And I think it really comes down to, what's the story that's behind volleyball? The NBA has lifestyle as their story. The MLB has the summer. They really own it, right? When you think of the NFL, they own a day of the week. It's Sunday. It's hanging out with family. I think volleyball can be a sport where we advertise one of the greatest benefits that comes with that community is the community and the friendship that are established through playing volleyball. In this case, we want to create that same experience at our events online, where it's a place to come and hang out with a community of people that enjoy watching volleyball.
All right. Yeah, and when it comes to beach volleyball, there's definitely that whole culture of sun and sand.
It's a lifetime sport. It's a great way to exercise. It's got a lot of benefits.
Yep. All right. And actually, for those of you, well, none of you guys are volleyball people, so I don't even need to put this reservation in there. But what would surprise a lot of people is if you go to USA Volleyball Open Nationals, or just Nationals, it's adult Nationals, and COVID aside, they hold it every year in, I think, June or July. They have divisions, I think, 70 is the top age group now, maybe even 80. I mean, there are people in that age group that are playing nationals every year. So it really is the idea of being that lifetime sport. Okay.
Yes, and I go and watch them to support them, because one day I hope that will be me.
All right. So next question goes a little bit away from sponsorships, but what's the hardest / biggest challenge you've had to adapt with while in the pandemic? And was this challenge there before COVID, for example, getting sponsor money or getting fans, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think, one of the challenges that existed before and still is getting fans. That is the challenge that we are trying to solve for. Volleyball as a sport, you have some of the highest participation rates at the high school level for women's. Volleyball has been double-digit growth at the men's side. And so you have a lot of players, but you don't have a lot of people that watch it. And we're trying to solve that. When I think about some of the challenges that didn't exist and do exist now is how hard it is to throw events. It is tremendously difficult to navigate and keep everyone safe, right? That's our priority. And it's really difficult to navigate all of the different laws and rules in different states. And so it becomes another factor in our planning process when we think about creating a season is where do we create our events? John and I were talking, New York is stricter than going to Texas, but is going to Texas the right decision? Time will tell. It's really hard to create a volleyball league, a sports league, without having a huge stream of revenue, as well as just exposure with not having fans at your events.
Okay. All right, kind of along a similar thread, since you had to take a season off or had an abbreviated season last year because of COVID, do you think it will be easier or harder to market to fans to come to watch now that you're starting to be able to ramp back up again?
Yeah, I think it could make arguments for either side, but because I have a vested interest in articulating the reasons why it would be easier to attract friends, I'll stick with that one, which is, holy hell, aren't we really excited to go and do something? I think everyone's going to be super welcomed to go out and do something as simple as going to watch volleyball and have a great time doing it. So I think it's going to be easier to attract those fans coming out of the pandemic. But I think it also is really, really important that we understand that when I think about the fans, I think like after spending, however long we've been in, an abridged quarantine, I think that a lot of people are going to do what they really are passionate about. And so I think we're really going to see how many passionate volleyball players and fans are out there, because I think more and more people are only going to focus on the things that they really, really enjoy. And I think there's a lot of people out there that really, really enjoy volleyball.
Well, I think it definitely does help that you're largely associating yourself with like juniors events. And as the passion for people wanting to get back to playing or attending in the case of, parents and family, because there's still limitations in a lot of places as to how many people can go and attend outside the teams, then it, just helps you guys, I would think. Okay, next question. How does recruiting work for the VLA? Are you looking more at the club or the college level? I know there are a lot of players also come from outside the U.S. When I went to Springfield College, most of the players on their men's teams were from Puerto Rico. How does meeting with those players look? Is it different because of COVID?
Yeah, there's no doubt that Springfield does an amazing job of recruiting from a volleyball hotspot like Puerto Rico. I think one of the things that is not necessarily a real challenge right now is finding really top talented volleyball players that want to play at a high level. There are multiple inbound requests to find teams and join the league. And so there are a lot of people interested, not only from an individual player perspective, but teams that also want to participate in the league. And so we haven't really had a challenge with finding those talented players. It's really how do we maximize utilizing them to help us grow the league and grow them and those teams that are interested in playing. That's the challenge we're solving.
Yeah, I would think just in my experience in volleyball, especially on the men's side, there's always people who want to play. You know,
Always.
and obviously you guys are not you're not a fully professional league where guys are getting paid to just play volleyball. So they're working other jobs and doing other things. And so can you speak to where, actually there's two parts to this because you kind of mentioned bringing in new teams. How are you looking at where you're establishing these teams? And can you talk about, now you've got two tiers?
Yeah, I think, you know, one of the things that we have observed from looking at other recent leagues like Athletes United, the PLL, is that based on a lot of the conversations we had with fans at some of our events pre-pandemic, was where are these teams from? Where are these players from? And so I think there is a piece that is missing currently with some of the other leagues that have just started, which is how do we create that visceral attachment to a team that's brand new, right? You know, when you think about if the MLB didn't exist and then all of a sudden it started, and you didn't know anything about the teams other than where they're from, you're probably going to make an attachment to the teams that are closest to you because that's who they quote unquote represent. And so we are purposely putting locations on our teams, even though the players are from all over, because we have found that people want to attach themselves to teams regionally to make it easier for them to become a fan of somebody in the league and enjoy in the competition of that league. And so we are looking at regionally spreading our teams across the United States so that we have that attachment and that coverage across the entire league. When I think about really what's the value add of Tier 1 and Tier 2 teams, is that we have the ability to really have high quality volleyball with our Tier 1. We have a wealth of individuals that want to play at a competitive level, but we need to balance between the high level competition and the need to create content that people can watch. And so we preserve both by having two tiers. We have a top tier that is going to provide super high level content, but at any level of volleyball, there are amazing plays, amazing athletes, and it provides additional content for us to use in our promotion of the league.
Okay, very good. Got a question that's already partially been answered. Can you watch the VLA online through social media or website? Yes, through YouTube Live. You brought that up before. But continuing, also, do you have an app, or are you considering making an app for the future?
Yes. So we are producing content on, as John mentioned, the Volleyball League of America YouTube Live. And you can see all of our previous matches, highlights, all on the Volleyball League of America YouTube channel. We got Facebook, VLA Volleyball, Instagram, and Twitter for those bite-sized pieces of content. When I think about the opportunity to really integrate more technology into the league, we are looking at a few things. You know, one idea that has been tossed around is, how do we create fantasy volleyball? How do we create an attachment to our players at a greater level? And so fantasy volleyball apps come to mind. And then another idea that comes to mind is really leveraging the total asset of what a professional volleyball league provides the market, which is high quality, talented players that are knowledgeable in the sport of volleyball. Coaching, clinics, and skill review come to mind. And how do we scale that during a pandemic, or even in the future? We could use technology where we can connect our fans with professional volleyball players for the opportunity to get coaching techniques or personalized reviews of plays as another means to grow the league but create revenue from it.
Okay. Question that came in was, what are some goals for the VLA, and how has the pandemic affected them?
Yeah, our objective is to grow the sport of volleyball here in the U.S. Our goals that support that is to create a sustainable volleyball league within 3 years. And so we're about, I would say, 1 year into that 3-year endeavor. The way in which the pandemic has impacted that is extended that time frame for about a year. And so our goal has always been, how do we create a sustainable volleyball professional league? And that is really important to us because we want to make sure we stick around. We've looked at some other leagues that have come and gone, and it was the primary reason that they are not here anymore is because there wasn't a sustainable business model. And so we want to make sure we establish that sustainable business model, and we do it in a way that allows us to maintain and grow sustainably.
Okay. If anybody else has any more questions, feel free to post them in. What I'm going to turn to right now is something that was a heavy part of our last lecture on developing sponsorships, is actually the process that you go through. Can you describe what your workflow is like from kind of identifying potential sponsors, approaching them, learning, what they're after, developing a plan or a concept for them, and that whole string of events?
Totally. I think the first step is who is our target market from a viewership perspective. So when you think about a sales engagement, it's usually two people, right, or two entities, right? B2B, B2C. You have an entity interested in purchasing something. The fun dynamic of sports sponsorship is that there's a third entity in that relationship, because sports creates a platform to attract eyeballs. Those eyeballs turn into value for potential sponsors. And so you have a three-way relationship where you have to manage each of them and respect each of them. So our target market for people that we want to watch volleyball, and is also supported based on our followers, is the 15 to 25-year-olds that are specifically volleyball players. So now we have our target market. And what that allows us to do is then go out into the market and talk to other companies that share that demographic. So when you think about 15 to 25-year-olds and who is interested in supporting those or sell into or market to those individuals, the gamut really opens up. It's one of the hottest, sweetest markets to market to because it's so valuable to those entities. So we're focusing specifically first on the volleyball community because we think that and it has been easier of a sell. And then we're also looking at a list of companies that want to sell or market to those individuals between 15 to 25, male, females. The next step is regional based. So because we're tour based, we are regionally focusing our sales in areas where we are going to be, which has allowed us to secure some regional sponsors at our events.
Okay. So we had one question come in, but actually just to continue with this thread for a second, when you've got that identification, what does the process look like after you have identified a target? You know, how do you approach them? How do you work with them to structure a deal?
Yeah. So now we have the target market. What's kind of our elevator speech, our elevator pitch? And so I think that there's another piece that happens before we pitch, which is we want to work with someone that is already familiar and excited to use sports sponsorships as a means to advertise their products. How do we evaluate that? We are combing through all of MLB partnerships, all of the sports sponsorships that exist out there, because they already know the value of sports sponsorships, and we don't need to educate them on that. One of the hardest things to do is educate a buyer on why a product or service is helpful, is valuable for them. And so we are specifically targeting those that already know, already understand the value of sports sponsorships. So once we get into those conversations, they already know how valuable sports sponsorships is, and the metrics that are most important to them is the number of eyeballs that will be able to see their product. Because our numbers are where they are, we are really leveraging our social media reach and our YouTube followers. So when you subscribe, you are increasing the value of those platforms and the actual value that we can drive to those businesses. So we work with them to quantify the value, and then we quantify those values with social media and via the YouTube numbers, and then we're able to really talk about how we can package a way to advertise their products and services in a way that aligns with their brand's needs. So now we take a look at what is available for us to sell across the VLA assets. We have social media, we have player profiles, we have advertisements at our events, we have advertisements on our streaming platform. We have the ability to do, hopefully in the future, more marketing activations where they bring their products to our events and they can advertise using our platform, and we can advertise for them in our platform to comb through our sponsors as a means to help support that league. And so we work with them to customize what they want. We have packages, small, medium, large, that help guide the conversation and allows us to really find one that works for them.
Okay, that's good. Mark asks, what are some good examples of a marketing strategy in a time where the company is struggling, or in your case, obviously the league, or the sport in general isn't getting a lot of exposure? And he says, for example, do you have anything lined up in the near future for after COVID?
Yeah, I think one of the things that we are really trying to do is the more that we can have a consistent message across all of our platforms, the more successful we believe we are going to be. And so one of the ideas that we're looking to do is provide a behind-the-scenes documentary on the sport of volleyball, why it's great, why professional volleyball, why it's growing as a sport here in the U.S., and why, as maybe someone that is a volleyball friendly or new to volleyball, should come check out volleyball. And so we are in those conversations right now with potentially creating a documentary to really put the VLA in the forefront of professional sports here in the U.S.
That's interesting. I haven't heard that one before, but yeah, I mean, considering all the documentaries we see of other sports on Amazon and on Netflix, they have an impact. That's for sure. I mean, I watched a Formula One documentary a couple of years ago and started watching Formula One. I'd never really watched it before. They got me.
That's exactly the model that we want to create.
Very good. Okay, so as we said, you guys are coming to Buffalo. 3 of the teams are coming to Buffalo. One of them is a New York team, and I'm forgetting the other 2. So when you're assuming you had fans, assuming people are allowed to come and watch, which we're still a little bit shaky on right now, but what would you want ideally to have in the arena or in the facility as your kind of the atmosphere around your event?
Yeah, I think it really stems to, our belief in why volleyball as a sport is so great is because of the welcoming community that it is. And our events, we want to emulate that experience that you have as a player and extend it to those that maybe aren't interested in potentially playing, but more interested in being just a watcher, or for those fans that were once in their primes and still get the similar enjoyment that they did when they played by watching volleyball. And so our events are going to be really about creating a sense of community by tying and getting our fans as close to the players as possible. And so some of the things that we are doing further into our seasons is camps and clinics to get players in our league an opportunity to be in front of our fans and really close to them, because it's the relationships that we build here in the volleyball community that make it so popular, and we want to do that at our events.
Okay, we've got an interesting question. It's partly tied in with the recruiting question before, but it takes it in a different direction. So we all know that volleyball is a sport played throughout the whole world. The Olympics is a perfect example of how much it has progressed over the years. Does VLA think of recruiting players outside the U.S. or finding talent outside the U.S.? Wouldn't that be a way for the company, the league, getting more exposure and recognition outside the U.S., thus getting more followers? It says, my goal for my organization is to expand in other countries, and recruiting players outside of England is a way of gaining more followers.
I love it.
It's a big business model for like teams in the Premier League and stuff like that.
Yeah, I love it. I think we are not doing that right now. Do I think we could? Absolutely. I think it becomes a resource constraint challenge that we exist. So when I think about attracting top talent from outside the U.S., I think about all of the logistical needs of those individuals that aren't U.S. citizens. So sponsorship, travel, citizenship, all of the things that go along with getting those players here in the United States, and then also providing them with a livable wage to make it worth it. So those are things, when those resource constraints are so tight, that we will be exploring, and I think is a fabulous example of ways to accelerate growth. What we are doing right now is there are plenty of players in the U.S. that play internationally that we are strategically putting our season to a time frame where those European and international leagues are ending, and those players come back to the U.S., and we give them a platform to continue to play. So those players are bringing their international fans that they make overseas to our league. Some examples are Cody Kessel. He plays in Berlin Recyclers right now. He has an amazing followers, has gained many more followers now that he's on Berlin Recyclers, one of the best teams professionally across all leagues. Other examples of that include Dave Weizurka. He's also in Germany. Blake Leeson, he's in Switzerland. And so we're kind of doing, I think, similarly to what you're proposing here, that you're doing for soccer in the UK, but doing it in a different way by actually taking U.S. players that played internationally to tap into those international fans when they play for us here in the U.S.
Yeah, something else that I was thinking of in that regard is, to your point about resource constraints, is one of the issues you would have is, well, how do you deal with sponsorships when you say you bring in a really high-profile Brazilian player, for example? That really changes the dynamics of the eyeballs. And so which means you have to rearrange your approach to how you're getting sponsorships and other business arrangements, which may or may not be the most efficient thing currently, but obviously could very well be down the line.
Yeah, that's a great point. It is a great growth strategy, tapping into new markets. I think in order for it to be successful, we have a baseline market that needs to be created here, providing the foundation for us to go internationally.
Right. Okay. We got a few more minutes before we'll end up wrapping up. So if there's any more questions that you guys have, make sure you get them in now. So of course, the challenge that we've always got with volleyball is there's been a bunch of leagues out there, and most of them have fallen by the wayside one way or the other. You talked about wanting within 3 years, a little bit extended now because of the COVID situation, to create this sustainable league. So what will it take for you guys to be sustainable? What does that look like?
Yeah. I think a few things. So when you think about sports, there's multiple revenue streams, and I think what makes sports so successful is that, especially it was put to test during the COVID pandemic, is that you're able to successfully stand up multiple revenue streams. We're focusing on partnerships. We're focusing on our social and streaming revenue. We're focusing on our ticketing revenue, and we're focused on our merchandise revenue. And if we are successful at establishing, let's say, 3 out of 4 of those, I think we will be able to become a self-sustainable league come 3 years from now. That's selling partnerships that allows us to put logos, advertisements on jerseys across our courts, everywhere to help promote the sport of volleyball and those partners. 2, creating our ability to create great content through social and streaming, increasing our followers on YouTube Live, exploring conversations with other distribution channels, with other streaming services, and standing up ticketing that allows us to create camps, clinics, and charge fees for people to attend live events. and a merchandise store that allows us to not only capitalize the gear that we sell, but the branding that's now walking through every volleyball and every school after that purchase.
Okay, sounds good. You've obviously kind of researched other leagues and organizations. Just in terms of what, for those, obviously there's a lot that are struggling, and maybe not the high-profile leagues, MLB, NFL, because they've got massive resources available to them. But for those leagues and organizations that are a little bit lower down, what's been the biggest negative impact from COVID in terms of their business?
Yeah, I think instantly all ticketing revenue has gone out the door. I think I read recently the NFL still made a ton of money because they did such a good job on partnerships and their sponsorship revenues. And I still think that that's a huge opportunity for even the smaller leagues out there, is to really capitalize on partnerships, because in today's marketing world, it is so competitive to become a product or a service that distinguishes themselves as the reason someone purchases their product. And it is no longer the days where you can send coupons, emails, buy one, get one offers. All of those marketing channels have been oversaturated. And so the strategy has to change. And I think one of the greatest available strategies for marketers out in the world today is sports marketing. I recognize I'm hugely biased here, right? But hopefully that makes a lot of sense to you all, because I think it's really what I think a lot of the generations of myself and younger, it's all about experience. And that experience creates those connections, and it makes that buying decision a lot much easier when you see a Nike logo on the back of your favorite sports athlete, because it just makes it social proof that if I want to be like Mike, I go to Nike.
All right. I think we'll wrap it up there. Appreciate it, Will.
Awesome. Thanks, John. Thanks, everyone. If you want to learn more, follow us on VLA Volleyball on Instagram, YouTube. But thanks for having me.